The air in the Valley View Mall was thick enough to drink. It tasted of cinnamon from the pretzel stand, cheap pine from the plastic wreaths, and the faint panicked sweat of 1,000 last-minute shoppers. Carols, tinny and worn from a month of repetition, warbled from unseen speakers, a cheerful soundtrack to a slow-motion battle. In the very center of this festive chaos, a small kingdom had been carved out. A velvet rope, the color of dried blood, cordoned off a patch of fake snow and a monstrous, gilded throne. Upon this throne sat an old man. He was Santa Claus, or rather, he was a man paid to be Santa Claus. His suit was a decent rental, the plush crimson already showing the faintest sheen of wear at the elbows and knees. His boots were black and impeccably polished, a small, private point of pride. But the beard was a disaster. It was a synthetic catastrophe of nylon fluff, clearly and unapologetically fake. Its elastic strap cut a sharp line against his weathered skin, just below his ears. It did not blend. It did not convince. It hung from his face like a misplaced shred of insulation. The old man did not seem to mind. He sat with a stillness that was unnerving in the swirling vortex of the mall. While parents wrangled screaming toddlers and teenagers skulked past in sullen packs, he was a point of absolute calm. His back was straight. His gloved hands rested on the arms of the throne, steady as stone. Only his eyes moved, tracking the approach of the next child in line with a look of profound, gentle weariness. They were pale blue eyes, nestled in a web of wrinkles, and they held the quiet patience of a man who had waited out worse things than a shopping rush. A small girl with pigtails was on his lap, whispering a breathless, convoluted list into his ear. He listened intently, nodding. His head was cocked, as if her tiny voice was the most important signal in the world. When she finished, he smiled a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes but did not quite reach the tired depths within them. "That's a fine list," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, muffled slightly by the fake white hair. "You be a good girl for your mom now. Santa will see what he can do." He handed her a candy cane from a bucket beside the throne. His movements were economical, deliberate. There was no tremor in his hand. Perfectly steady. The girl scampered off, and the line shuffled forward. Then they arrived. They cut through the crowd, not with force, but with an aura of sharp-edged importance that parted civilians like a ship's bow through water. 3 of them, all in their late 20s, all radiating the unsubtle confidence of men who believe the world was their personal stage. They wore the dress blue uniforms of the United States Air Force. The one in the lead was a captain. His rank was a silver glint on his shoulders, polished to a mirror shine. His name tag read Evans. He was handsome in a severe, angular way, with a haircut so precise it looked like it had been applied by a laser. He walked with a swagger that was just on the edge of a parade march. His ego entered the room a full second before he did. Captain Evans surveyed the Santa display with a look of supreme disdain. His lip curled. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice loud enough to slice through the surrounding chatter. "This is what passes for Christmas magic. Look at this setup." His 2 companions, both lieutenants, snickered on cue. They were his hyenas, eager for the lion's approval. "Come on, Mark," one of them said. "Your sister made us promise we'd get a picture." Evans rolled his eyes. "A picture with this sad sack? My sister has a warped sense of humor." He fixed his gaze on the old man in the chair. He saw a frail, tired relic in a cheap costume. He saw a joke. He saw a target. The old man did not look up. He was focused on the next child, a boy in a superhero sweatshirt who was shyly clutching the velvet rope. This indifference was, to Captain Evans, a profound offense. He was an officer. He was important. When he spoke, people were supposed to notice. He strode forward, ignoring the dirty looks from the parents in line. He stopped directly in front of the throne, his polished shoes on the edge of the fake snow. "Hey, Pops!" The old man finished settling the shy boy on his knee. He gave Evans a slow, passing glance, the kind one might give a buzzing fly, before turning his full attention back to the child. "And what's your name, son?" the old man rumbled. Evans felt a hot spike of anger in his chest. Ignored. He, a captain in the world's greatest air force, was being ignored by some geriatric rent-a-clown. I'm talking to you, old-timer, Evans snapped. His voice was sharper now, a drill instructor's bark. The line went dead silent. The elf helper, a college student named Brenda, with glitter on her cheeks, froze with a half-smile plastered on her face. The parents in line stared, a mixture of shock and apprehension on their faces. The cheerful carols suddenly sounded mocking. The old man gently asked the boy on his lap, "Have you been good this year?" "Yes, sir," the boy whispered. "Sir?" "He's calling him sir," one of the lieutenants muttered, and they both stifled laughter. This was the final straw for Evans. The public humiliation, the utter lack of deference. His authority was being challenged. "All right, that's it," Evans said, stepping over the velvet rope. The elf gasped. "Show's over. Everybody out of the way." He planted himself directly in front of the throne, blocking the boy from view. "Listen to me, you old fraud," he hissed, leaning down. The smell of his expensive, spicy cologne was suffocating. "When an officer speaks to you, you answer. You get me? What's so important that you can't show a little respect?" The old man finally lifted his head. His pale blue eyes met the captain's furious brown ones. There was no fear in them, no anger. There was only a vast, bottomless disappointment. "This boy," the old man said, his voice calm and even, "is important." The simplicity of his statement infuriated Evans more than any insult could have. It was a dismissal. It framed him as a petty interruption to a sacred duty. He felt his face flush. He was used to being the smartest, strongest, most important man in any room. This decrepit mall Santa was making him look like a fool. "This boy," Evans scoffed, gesturing dismissively. "I'm a captain in the United States Air Force. I think my rank demands a little more priority than some kid's Christmas list." He was posturing, asserting a dominance that had no jurisdiction here. The uniform was his shield and his weapon, and he wielded it with clumsy arrogance. He failed to notice the context. He failed to see the audience. He saw only the perceived slight to his ego. Across the way, near a kiosk selling phone cases, a young man watched the scene unfold. He was holding his daughter's tiny hand, his wife looking at festive scarves beside him. He was young, maybe 21, and wore civilian clothes. But his haircut was military short, and his posture was ramrod straight. Airman First Class Peterson felt a knot of cold dread tighten in his stomach. He recognized the rank on the captain's shoulders. He recognized the type, the academy hotshot, drunk on his own minor authority, who believed the uniform gave him the right to be a tyrant. Peterson had served under men like Evans. He knew the casual cruelty, the inflated sense of self-worth. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that what he was witnessing was a profound violation. An officer, in uniform, publicly harassing an elderly civilian. It was a disgrace. His wife touched his arm. "What's wrong, honey? You look upset." "That captain," Peterson whispered, his eyes locked on the unfolding drama. "He's out of line. Way out of line." Back at the throne, Evans was doubling down. The old man's silence was a vacuum, and Evans rushed to fill it with his own loud-mouthed poison. "Look at you," he sneered, his gaze sweeping over the Santa suit. "Pathetic. They couldn't even spring for a real beard. How much do they pay you to sit here and lie to children all day?" The old man did not answer. He simply placed a comforting hand on the shoulder of the boy, who was now starting to look frightened. "Let the boy go," the old man said. His voice was not a request. It was a soft, firm command. Evans laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Or what? You'll have your elves rough me up? You're in no position to make demands, Grandpa. In fact, I'm thinking you might be a security risk. You look a little shaky. Maybe you're not fit to be around kids. You have a background check? Let me see your identification." He had crossed a line, from mockery to a direct, unwarranted challenge of authority. He was weaponizing his rank in a civilian space, a cardinal sin. The elf, Brenda, finally found her voice. "Sir, you need to leave. I'm calling security." Evans shot her a look that could curdle milk. "You stay out of this, little girl. This is official business." It was, of course, nothing of the sort. It was a pathetic power play, a bully's desperate attempt to regain control. His friends, the lieutenants, were starting to look uncomfortable. The joke had soured. This was escalating into something ugly. "Mark, maybe we should just go," one of them suggested quietly. "Shut up, Dave," Evan snapped without looking at him. His focus was entirely on the old man. The man's infuriating, unshakable calm. It was like punching water. "I asked you for your ID," Evans repeated, his voice low and menacing. "Are you deaf as well as old?" The old man sighed. It was a sound of immense weariness, the sound a mountain might make if it could feel the erosion of the wind. "My name is Jack," he said quietly. "Jack," Evans mocked. "Just Jack? No rank, no history? I bet you were a real hero in your day, weren't you, Jack? A regular warrior. What was your call sign back in a big one? Santa 1? Rudolph Leader?" He chuckled, pleased with his own wit. The words sliced through the stale mall air. Call sign. The phrase landed inside the old man's mind, not as an insult, but as a key turning a lock on a door rusted shut for decades. The scent of cinnamon and pine vanished. The tinny carols faded into a high-pitched whine. The mall disappeared. He was no longer in a gilded throne. He was strapped into the pilot seat of a C-130 Hercules, the cockpit lit only by the green glow of the instrument panel. The airframe groaned around him, a beast in agony. Outside the reinforced canopy, there was only a blinding, swirling vortex of white. A blizzard in the Arctic Circle. Ice was forming on the wings. He could feel it in the sluggish response of the yoke, a fatal sickness spreading through the plane's bones. The radio crackled, a voice cutting through the static, tinny and distant. "Vanguard, this is Frostbite Base. We've lost you on radar. Repeat, we have lost you. You're flying too low. Abort mission. I repeat, abort the mission." He keyed the mic, his thumbs steady despite the violent turbulence that rattled his teeth. "Negative frostbite," he said, his voice calm, the same gravelly rumble he used for the children. "Aborting is not an option. The package must be delivered." On the console next to him, a small, hand-carved wooden reindeer, a gift from his daughter, was glued to the panel. He touched its head for luck. "We're tracking 3 MiG squadrons vectoring on your last known position." The voice from the radio crackled, frayed with panic. "They will be on top of you in minutes. You have to turn back." He looked at the radar. It was a screen of useless green snow. He was flying nap of the earth, 10 feet above the ice shelf, hidden from their scopes but blind himself, navigating by a compass, a stopwatch, and a map seared into his memory. "Tell the boys at Outpost Zebra to light their Christmas tree," he transmitted. "Their presents are about to arrive." A long silence. Then the voice from Frostbite Base, now filled with a kind of desperate reverence. "Godspeed, Captain Claus." The memory evaporated as quickly as it had come. The green glow of the cockpit dissolved back into the garish gold of the throne. The roar of the engines became the dull roar of the crowd. The scent of jet fuel and ozone was replaced by stale popcorn. But the stillness remained, the steadiness. He looked at Captain Evans, whose face was now contorted in a mask of pure frustration. He saw not a man, but a boy. A loud, frightened boy, so terrified of being seen as small that he had to puff himself up and try to make everyone else smaller. Airman Peterson saw the captain sneer. He heard the words "call sign," and something in him snapped. This wasn't just an officer being a jerk anymore. This was a desecration. He didn't know why, it was just a gut feeling, a deep, instinctual revulsion. He turned to his wife. "Watch Lily for a second. I have to make a call." He walked quickly away from the scene, pulling out his phone. His fingers were trembling slightly, not with fear, but with rage. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number he was looking for. Master S.G.T. Rhodes, the command chief's executive assistant at the local Air Force base. A man who could move mountains with a single phone call. Rhodes picked up on the second ring. "Sergeant Rhodes." "Sergeant, this is Airman Peterson. I was in your first-term airman class last year." "I remember you, Peterson. What's wrong? You sound stressed." "Sir, I'm at the Valley View Mall," Peterson said, his voice low and urgent. "There's an Air Force captain here. His name tape says Evans. He's in his dress blues, and he's publicly harassing the mall Santa. In front of everyone. Kids, families. He's making a complete ass of himself and the uniform. There was a moment of dead silence on the other end of the line. Are you serious, Airman? Rhodes's voice had dropped several degrees. Deadly serious, Sergeant. He's demanding ID, calling the old man names. He's completely lost it. It's bad. It's really, really bad for the uniform. Another pause. Peterson could hear the faint sound of typing in the background. The general is on base today, Rhodes said, his voice tight. He's in a meeting with the wing commander. They were just talking about community relations. The irony in his voice was thick. Stay where you are, Airman. Do not engage. I'll handle it. The line went dead. Peterson felt a surge of adrenaline. He had just dropped a bomb. He didn't know if he'd get in trouble or get a medal, but he knew he had done the right thing. He looked back toward the throne. Things had gotten worse. Evans, having received no satisfaction, no apology, no fear, had reached his breaking point. His impulse control, eroded by ego and anger, finally crumbled. I'm tired of your games, old man, he snarled. And he reached out. His hand, young and strong, shot forward and grabbed the top of the fake white beard. He yanked. There was a collective gasp from the crowd, a single, sharp intake of breath. The elastic strap snapped. The beard came away, hanging pathetically from the old man's left ear by the remaining loop. The face it revealed was weathered and deeply lined, a roadmap of 80 years. A small, faded scar cut through his left eyebrow. His jaw was firm, covered in a neat stubble of white. But it was his eyes that held everyone captive. They were fixed on Captain Evans, and the disappointment had finally burned away, leaving something else in its place. Not anger, not fear. It was a cold, hard pity. The look of a god watching a foolish mortal seal his own doom. The old man didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just sat there, perfectly still, as the symbol of his gentle charade was torn from him. And in that moment of profound, ugly silence, a new sound entered them all. It was a sound that did not belong. The heavy, authoritative slam of the main entrance doors swinging open with tremendous force. Every head in the central concourse turned. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light, stood 4 figures. The mall's ambient noise, the carols, the chatter, the crying of children, did not just quiet down. It ceased to exist. It was as if someone had hit a cosmic mute button. The figure in the center was a man of medium height and immense presence. He wore the same dress blue uniform as Evans, but it seemed to be made of a different substance entirely. His shoulders were broad, and upon them sat 4 silver stars, gleaming like a constellation of doom. A 4-star general. Flanking him were 2 massive security forces airmen, their faces impassive granite, their hands resting near the sidearms on their belts. Beside the general stood a command chief master sergeant, the highest enlisted rank in the Air Force, his uniform covered in a lifetime of service ribbons. Master Sergeant Rhodes. Captain Evans froze. His hand was still half raised, the ridiculous white beard dangling from his fingers. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly white. His brain, which had been running hot with rage and arrogance, stalled. It tried to process the impossible sight of a 4-star general, his own base's highest enlisted man, and armed guards marching into a shopping mall on a Tuesday afternoon. The general's eyes swept the room once, taking in the entire scene in a fraction of a second. He saw the shocked crowd. He saw the trembling elf. He saw the disgraced captain. And he saw the old man on the throne, his face exposed, his dignity under assault. The general's face, already stern, hardened into something terrifying. It was a look of cold, controlled fury, a look that had made colonels tremble and foreign dignitaries sweat. He ignored Evans completely. He ignored the lieutenants, who looked like they were about to be physically ill. He ignored the entire gawking population of them all. His gaze was locked, with laser-like intensity, on the old man in the chair. He began to walk forward. His entourage moved with him, a single, silent unit. Their polished black shoes made crisp, synchronous sounds on the polished linoleum floor. Click, click, click. It was the only sound in the entire world. The crowd parted for them, a human sea receding from a force of nature. People scrambled backward, tripping over shopping bags, pressing themselves against storefronts. The general walked the 50 yards from the entrance to the Santa throne without breaking stride. He moved with a purpose that was both terrifying and absolute. He stopped exactly 3 feet from the platform, his toes just shy of the fake snow. He came to a halt. His escorts stopped a pace behind him, their faces like stone masks. Captain Evans stood petrified, trapped between the general and the old man, a mouse caught between 2 lions. The general looked at the old man. His expression of fury softened, melting away to be replaced by something else. Awe, reverence. He brought his heels together with a sharp, audible crack that echoed in the cavernous silence. He raised his right hand to the brim of his cap in a salute. It was not a casual gesture. It was a salute of profound, soul-deep respect. His arm was ramrod straight, his fingers perfectly aligned, his posture a study in military perfection. It was the kind of salute a soldier gives to a monument, to a flag, to a fallen hero. His voice, when he spoke, was not a shout. It was clear, powerful, and resonated with an emotion that shook the very air. "Captain Claus," the general said, his voice thick. "It is an honor, sir." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible to the crowd, but a death sentence to Captain Evans. He finally dropped the fake beard. It fell to the floor with a soft, pathetic puff. The old man, Jack, looked at the general. For the first time, a flicker of emotion showed in his pale blue eyes. It was recognition, and a deep, abiding sadness. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The general held the salute for a long, charged moment, then crisply lowered his hand. He kept his eyes on Jack, but he spoke to the room, to the stunned and silent audience. "Everyone," he began, his voice a commanding baritone that needed no microphone. "I advise you all to remember what you are seeing today." He turned his head slowly, and his gaze fell upon Captain Evans. The warmth and reverence in his eyes vanished, replaced by a glacial cold. It was the most terrifying transformation anyone there had ever witnessed. "This, officer," the general began, his voice dripping with contempt, "has made a grave error. He mistook age for weakness. He mistook humility for frailty. He stood here, in a uniform he has clearly not earned, and he chose to publicly humiliate a man whose service and sacrifice beggar his paltry understanding." He took a step closer, and Evans flinched backward as if he had been physically struck. "You see an old man in a Santa's suit," the general continued, his voice rising in power. "I see a giant. I see a hero of the United States Air Force. I see a man who is a living legend within circles you can't even imagine, Captain." He gestured to the old man on the throne. "For those of you who do not know," the general announced, his voice booming through the concourse, "you are in the presence of retired Colonel John Morrison, a command pilot with over 10,000 flight hours, a veteran of 2 conflicts, a pioneer of high-altitude special operations infiltration." The crowd murmured. Phones were now openly recording. "This officer," the general said, pointing a single, trembling finger at Evans, "had the audacity to mock this man's call sign. Let me tell you about his call sign." The general's eyes took on a distant look, as if he were reading from a sacred text. On Christmas Eve, 1983, at the absolute height of the Cold War, a vital intelligence outpost in the Arctic Circle, call sign Outpost Zebra, went dark. They were compromised, isolated by the worst blizzard in 50 years, and their reactor was failing. 50 American servicemen were going to freeze to death in the dark. A rescue was impossible. A supply drop was suicidal. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. The mission was scrubbed. No aircraft could penetrate the storm, let alone evade the 3 squadrons of Soviet MiGs hunting for any sign of our presence. It was a death sentence. He turned back to Colonel Morrison, his voice softening again. But one man volunteered. Then Captain Morrison. He proposed a solo mission in a stripped-down C-130. No escort, no electronic countermeasures. Flying below radar, so low to the ice that his altimeter was screaming the whole way. He navigated for 600 miles through a polar vortex using a magnetic compass and dead reckoning. The general's voice grew thick with emotion. He broke through the storm, evaded the MiGs, and found that outpost in the middle of an ocean of white. He didn't just drop supplies. He dropped a custom-built microreactor core, a piece of equipment so delicate that the mission planners said it was impossible to airdrop. He circled the dying outpost once, his landing lights flashing, and pushed the pallet out himself. The men on the ground, who had given up all hope, called him a miracle. They lit their last flare to guide him. Their Christmas miracle. The general looked at the silent, awestruck crowd. The call sign they gave him that night, the one that spread through the special operations community like wildfire, was Captain Claus. Because on Christmas, he came from the sky and delivered the gift of life. A sob escaped from someone in the crowd. Airman Peterson stood with tears streaming down his face. This man, the general thundered, turning his full, apocalyptic fury back onto Evans, is a recipient of the Air Force Cross, our nation's second highest award for valor. He wears that suit and that beard every year, not for money, but to honor the memory of that night. To sit with children and remember a time when he delivered the greatest gift of all. He stepped right up to Evans, his face inches away. The captain was shaking, his eyes wide with terror. And you worthless, arrogant child. You stood here and you mocked him. You laid hands on him. You, in this uniform. You have desecrated this cloth. You have disgraced every man and woman who has ever worn it with honor. The general's voice dropped to a whisper, a sound more terrifying than any shout. Captain Evans, your career in the United States Air Force is over. As of this moment, he turned to the command chief. Chief Rhodes, relieve this man of his duties. He is confined to base, effective immediately. He will be met by security at the door. I want his formal resignation on my desk by 800 tomorrow. If it is not there, I will personally preside over the court-martial that will strip him of his rank and send him to Leavenworth. Is that clear? Crystal clear, General, the chief replied, his voice like grinding gravel. He stepped forward. Captain, let's go. Evans didn't move. He was paralyzed by the sheer totality of his ruin. The two security forces airmen stepped forward, each taking one of his arms in a firm, non-negotiable grip. They turned him and began to march him away. His two lieutenant friends, who had been trying to shrink into the floor, were met by the icy glare of Chief Rhodes. You too, with me. Now, they fell in behind the grim procession, their faces ashen. They were marched out of the mall, past the stunned shoppers, their shining uniforms now feeling like costumes of shame. The general watched them go, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. Then he turned back to the throne. The fury was gone, replaced by a deep, respectful humility. He walked up the single step onto the platform. Colonel Morrison, he said softly. Jack, on behalf of the entire Air Force, I am profoundly sorry. The old man, Jack, slowly reached up and gently removed the dangling remnant of the beard from his ear. He held the wad of nylon in his hand, looking at it. He looked up at the general. Then his eyes drifted to the entrance where the young captain had been led away. He's just a boy, Sam, Jack said, his voice quiet, full of pride and no ballast. The service is a hard teacher. The general nodded. It is. It will teach him humility, Jack continued, his voice a low rumble. Or will break him. It's the same lesson, really. Just depends on which side you're standing on when it comes. He offered a small, sad smile. There's no need to apologize for a storm. You just fly through it. The general seemed lost for words. He, a man who commanded thousands, stood humbled before a mall Santa. Is there anything I can do, sir? An escort home? Jack Morrison shook his head. He looked at the line of children, who were staring with wide, confused eyes. He looked at the next in line, a little girl clutching a worn teddy bear. I have a few more hours on my shift, General, he said, and there are children waiting. He placed the ruined beard on the floor next to the throne. He straightened his red suit. He smoothed his white-gloved hands over his knees and turned his attention to the line. Come on up, little one, he said to the girl with the teddy bear, his voice once again the warm, gentle rumble of Santa Claus. Don't be shy. Tell Santa what you'd like for Christmas. The general stared for a moment, his throat tight. He stepped back off the platform, gave one last, subtle nod of respect, and turned. "Let's go, Chief," he said quietly. He and his remaining escort walked away, the crowd parting for them once more. The silence held for a moment longer. Then a new sound began to ripple through them all. Applause. It started with one person, then another. Then it swelled into a wave of thunderous, heartfelt applause that washed over the Santa throne. It was for the old man. For Colonel Jack, Captain Claus, Morrison. He did not acknowledge it. He was busy listening intently to a little girl's hopes, his head cocked, as if her small voice were the most important signal in the world. The aftermath was swift and silent. Mark Evans was handed a pen the next morning and signed his career away. He was processed out of the Air Force with an other-than-honorable discharge that would follow him for the rest of his life. His friends, the lieutenants, were formally reprimanded and reassigned to a remote radar station in Alaska, a place known as a career graveyard. The story of the incident at the mall became a legend at Northwood Air Force Base. It was never written down in any official capacity, but it was told. Master sergeants told it to cocky young airmen. Flight commanders told it to new lieutenants fresh from the academy. It became a lesson, a cautionary tale known as the Ballad of Captain Claus. It was a story about respect, humility, and the heroes who walk among us, unseen. Airman Peterson received a quiet, personal thank you from the command chief and a glowing recommendation that fast-tracked his next promotion. He never spoke of it, but sometimes he would take his daughter to the mall just to see. The next Christmas, the Valley View Mall had a Santa again. He sat on the same gilded throne, but things were different. The cheap nylon beard was gone. In its place was a magnificent, real beard of flowing white hair. The old man had let it grow. His eyes were still the same pale, tired blue. His hands were still just as steady. But now, something else happened. Throughout the day, men and women in uniform, from the youngest recruits to senior officers, would walk past his throne. They would never stop. They would never break stride. But as they passed, each one would turn their head, meet his eyes for a brief second, and give a small, almost imperceptible nod. A silent salute. Jack Morrison would always return the nod, a quiet acknowledgement passing between generations of warriors. Then he would turn back to the child on his lap, his duty unfinished. Because some gifts are not delivered in a sleigh, but in the belly of a cargo plane flying through the dark. And the greatest heroes are often the ones who never ask for thanks, content to live in the quiet echo of the lives they saved. The silence he commanded was louder than any engine's roar.